Hi, I'm Tanya, and welcome back to my channel, where we talk about all things Scotland. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background, a little bit of history on me. Since we're going to talk a lot about Scottish history, I thought I would tell you how and why I fell in love with Scotland and why it is kind of my home away from home. When I was in my early 20s, I was in the military, and I begged and asked for an overseas duty location, but I wanted one that was remote. I had asked for something that was, I thought I could get the hardship type of a duty out of the way before I got married, before I had kids, that kind of thing. So I was asking for some very remote places, and one of the few places that was on the list of duty stations I could go to was Etzel, Scotland. I didn't ever think that I would get it, and I actually never thought that I wanted to go there. I never thought that Scotland would be a place that I would enjoy. But even though I asked for Diego Garcia, which is a little tiny island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, I asked for Diego Garcia, and a lot of people were asking for Etzel, Scotland. And miraculously, I got orders to Etzel, Scotland. So off to Scotland I went. I believe I was 20, I think. Yes, I think I was 20 years old. Got off the plane and immediately fell in love with this place. I have moved around a lot throughout my life and kind of lived in different places, and I really do enjoy traveling. I love seeing other countries. I love seeing other places and cultures. But getting off the plane in Scotland, it just felt like coming home. It just felt like the place that I belonged and the place that I needed to be forever. So I was there, let's see, I was supposed to be there for 2 years and ended up asking for an extension. They were getting ready to close the base, unfortunately, and it's a lot cheaper for them to just extend somebody who's already there instead of send me somewhere else and then pay for somebody else to come to Scotland, especially since the base was closing in about a year and a half after I left. While I was there, I did meet, let's see, for those of you who are Outlander fans, this will sound funny, but I met my Scottish Jamie. My husband's name is Jamie. I did meet him in Scotland. He is of Scottish descent, but he's American, and he's from the Midwest of the US. So we never would have met had it not been for being in the military. I am from California, and he's from the Midwest. So we both ended up in Etzel, Scotland, in this tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. Basically, Etzel is, if you know the geography of Scotland, Aberdeen is on the east coast and kind of towards the north, and then Dundee is further south, and Etzel is right in the middle of Aberdeen and Dundee. So it was really out in the middle of nowhere, but it was absolutely stunning. It was beautiful. I took every chance I could to go on a day off. Sometimes we would just say, let's drive north, let's drive, west. We couldn't obviously drive east because we were basically on the North Sea. And we would just go, we would just see, and it was absolutely incredible to live within a couple, well, for the most part, we lived, let's see, about 20 miles from Dunnottar Castle, if you've heard of Dunnottar. We also lived, so we rented a house that was rented by somebody else on the base, and when they got orders to leave, they didn't want the landlord to be left high and dry and not collect rent. So they introduced us, and we looked at the house, and we absolutely loved it. Even though it had 1960s Paisley's carpet and it was a very old house, we still fell in love with it. So the house was the hunting lodge at Lauriston Castle, and if you actually go and look up Lauriston Castle, the first one that will come up is Lauriston, that is in Edinburgh. There is a castle called Lauriston, Lauriston, in Edinburgh. But there's also another Lauriston Castle, which is much smaller. It's more of a grand house, I think is what we would probably think of it, but it's titled Castle. So we lived in the hunting lodge, which was probably about 200 yards from the castle. So, I mean, that's kind of incredible if you think about it. That was kind of a dream come true. It was a kind of a fairy tale. And I think kind of our whole love story thing is a fairy tale. So I met my husband there. We fell in love there. We got married as soon as we came back to the United States. And I always told him I need to go back. I need to go back to Scotland. I need to go back and see the things that I haven't seen. So at first it was going to be for our 5-year anniversary, and then our 10-year anniversary, and then 15. It just never happened. So we were, gosh, I think we were at our, how many years have we been? We've been married almost 26. And about 2.5 years ago, I got the opportunity to finally go back to Scotland. So over the years, I have collected books on Scotland. I have decorated my house with pictures from our time there and from other locations that I didn't get to see but wanted to. My kids have always known that I'm obsessed with Scotland since the early 90s, 1990s. So yes, I'm dating myself. It's always been kind of an obsession for me, and people have kind of almost teased me about it, to be honest. So in the summer of 2019, I got the opportunity to go back to Scotland for work. And actually, it was a work trip that was going to take me to London. And it was a work trip that was not set in stone. It's a kind of a weird situation. A lot of details, just long story short, they were going to take me to London. There was a group of people. We were going to be there for a few days, and the opportunity would be available to some people and not to others. If the opportunity was not available to me, then I would be sent back to the States, and they were going to pay for the flight to bring me back to the States, obviously. So I got there, and before we left, they planned all of our return flights. And essentially, they basically were planning on everybody returning pretty quickly, after the first week or so. And they said, "What do you want your return date to be?" And I said, "Well, do I have to come back as soon as we finish working?" And they said, "No. I mean, we don't care how long you stay there, as long as you use the ticket that we buy for you to come back. So you give us a date, and we will schedule your return flight." So I gave myself 6 weeks. I figured if the opportunity didn't work out, if I didn't end up staying in London for the full 6 weeks, then I would spend the 6 weeks touring Scotland. And I would be by myself. My husband and kids couldn't go with me. And I really wanted to share that with them. I wanted to experience that with them, but it just wasn't going to work out. So they booked my return flight. I went to London. I was there for 4 days, and I was released because the opportunity did not work out for me. And that's fine, because it ended up working out in the end, and I'm exceedingly happy with the way that it turned out. But at the time, it was devastating. At the time, it was very hard. And my husband wasn't there. I was by myself. I would say I was in a foreign country, but I had already lived there for a few years, and I was very comfortable. So the UK doesn't really feel like a foreign country to me. It just feels like home, to be absolutely honest. So there wasn't that barrier for me. I knew my way around. I knew how to drive on the opposite side of the road. So as soon as they released me from work, I rented a car. Now, the downside to this entire trip, or what I saw as a downside at the time, was that I couldn't plan anything. I couldn't book any hotels. I couldn't buy any train tickets. I couldn't make any plans because I didn't know if I was going to end up staying in London for the full 6 weeks or if I was going to end up leaving. So, I mean, I guess I initially thought maybe I could book a couple of things and then cancel them if I don't end up being able to go to Scotland. But I figured it was just better to play it by ear if I was released. So 4th day, 5th day in London, something like that, I was released. I went and got the car, and that was an experience because it was in the central London. I had driven on the wrong side of the road a lot, but never in central London. So I took the car, and in a flood of tears, because I was still pretty devastated, I drove out of London, and I just kept driving, and didn't know where I was going, didn't know where I was staying. It is a very long drive to get from London. From London to Edinburgh is about 9 or 10 hours. It's a pretty long drive. And I really kind of just thought, you know what, I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to stick to a schedule, and I don't even have to ask anybody, what do you want for dinner? Where do you want to go? It's all on me. It was all completely 100% up to me. luckily, my husband was very supportive, and he knew that I really needed that break, and he knew how much I needed to be in Scotland for a while. It had been so long, and I had wanted to go back for so long, and I think maybe he thought that a trip back um, would kind of extinguish some of that desire to go back and desire to move there and desire to travel. Unfortunately for him, it did the opposite. So after I left London, I got to the Scottish borders by the next morning. I did stop in York overnight. I found a hostel to stay in. I decided I wasn't going to worry about, 5-star hotels. Plus, I was on my own once I left London and once I was released from work. They weren't paying for food. They weren't paying for housing. Everything was completely transportation. That was all on my dime as soon as I was released. So I couldn't afford to stay in 5-star hotels or even a 3-star hotel. I did take a tent with me, and I planned to do some hiking and some camping, which I did. And I stayed in a few hostels, and I had never stayed in a hostel before. That was a little bit scary at first, and it was a new experience, but I ended up absolutely loving it. In my opinion, if you now I'm not knocking anybody who stays in really nice hotels, because there is something to be said about a very nice hot bath and luxury and that kind of stuff. But for me, being in Scotland was not about where I was laying my head at night. It wasn't about the luxury and the extra things that a hotel could provide. So for me, spending the least amount that I possibly could on my lodging and staying in hostels was the perfect answer, because they were very inexpensive. They had everything I needed. And I was there for Scotland, not for the nice hotels. Now, when I do get to go back, I would like to stay in a castle. I have not gotten to do that yet, but one of these days. So yeah, I toured Scotland, and I spent 5.5 weeks, and I went all the way around Scotland. I will do a video to kind of show you the track that I took and everywhere I went and all of the different things that I saw. So there will be a video that details that trip. It would either be a long video or maybe a multi-part, because 5.5 weeks of traveling is a long time. I did have to fly out of London at the end of that 5.5 weeks. So the last 3 days I spent leisurely driving a little bit at a time to get back to London and get on the flight. So yeah, I spent that time there, that 5.5 weeks, and I thoroughly enjoyed every second of it, and it thoroughly reignited my flame for all things Scotland. And I got even more into the history. I sat and I journaled and I drew and I read and I talked to the people and I met people, and I'm still friends with some of the people that I met, which was incredible. And then a year later, I had another opportunity, and this one was even better than the first. This one, so if any of you have ever watched the Great British Baking Show, there is an American version, and the American version is not as popular. It is not as well known, but it's the exact same show. It just has American bakers on it. And it is filmed in London. It is filmed at Pinewood Studios in the White Tent. Paul Hollywood was one of the judges. And in 2019, I ended up being a baker on the Great American Baking Show, season 5. So I had to go back to London, and the production company flew us out there, and my family decided to join us at the end of the filming so that they could be there for the finale. And then we would go on the long-awaited vacation of me and my husband and our kids getting to finally see Scotland, where we met and where we fell in love, and all of the things that I had obsessed about for so long. So, excuse me, talking a while, I need some water. So I went and I filmed the Great American Baking Show in London. And if you are interested in recipes, I do have a YouTube channel for recipes. It's called Global Bakes, and I will put a link in the description below so that if you want to follow that channel as well, I would love for you to. I do share recipes from all over the world. It's called Global Bakes because I really do like history and culture, and I have lived a lot of different places, and even the places I haven't lived, I like to make food from all different places. So I do share a lot of recipes, a lot of techniques. So check out Global Bakes, the YouTube channel. That's my other channel. But then make sure that you come back here and watch this one as well. Um, so so I was in London for the filming of the show, and then as soon as that was over, and my husband and kids were there, we took a train and we went to Scotland and we rented a car, and we spent another couple of weeks touring around Scotland. And once my kids saw Scotland, they realized why I have obsessed for so long. They absolutely loved it. They have talked about moving there. They've talked about going to school there. My daughter is looking at going into a master's program and potentially in the UK. My older son, unfortunately, if we move there, he's 25, so he wouldn't be able to go with us as a dependent. My youngest is 17, and he kind of wants us to move before he turns 18 so he can go as a dependent. So they now understand, they've seen it firsthand and they've experienced it, and they absolutely love Scotland, and they talk about going back. The next trip that was planned was going to be in 2020, and that was going to be my son and myself walking the West Highland Way. If you're not familiar with the West Highland Way, promise I will do a video on it. But it is a 95-mile walk, and you do a lot of camping, you do, some hiking, and I asked everybody else in the family if they wanted to go, and nobody was interested in that. They all want to stay in a hotel and just meet us at the end of the way. They don't think that 95 miles through the Scottish Highlands is a fun time, but for me it would be a dream come true. Walking through the Highlands, walking near the lakes, hiking and sleeping outside, which I've already done before, so I know that even in August it gets cold. But yeah, so that was our plan for 2020, and unfortunately COVID happened, so it didn't work out. One day we will go back as soon as travel resumes and things are a little bit back to normal. We will have some more time in Scotland. It will definitely be a thing. And now that my kids are older, I think that it's going to be a little bit easier for my husband and I to travel as well. And I want to see so many things in this world. This world is beautiful and vast, and there are so many places that interest me, but I think every trip will either begin or end with a trip to Scotland, because I'm so drawn to it. I'm so in love with it. And yeah, so that's what this channel is about. That's just sharing a love of Scotland and the place and the history and the people. So if you are interested in talking about Scotland, going on this journey with me, talking about the food and the culture and everything else that comes up about it, then like this video. That would really help me out, and subscribe. And then I would love it if you could leave me a comment and just let me know what kinds of content you would like to see. Would you prefer to see photos and videos of the places that I've been? Would you prefer to see itineraries of how to get around Scotland? Do you need travel tips? What kinds of things do you need to see? I would love to share that kind of information, and I would love for it to be helpful to you. So anything that you would like to talk about, any information that you need, or if you just want to drop a note to say hi and tell me how much you love Scotland too, that would be great. So there is so much to see, there's so much to talk about, and there is so much coming up, because honestly, I could talk about Scotland all the time, and that's why this is the perfect YouTube channel for me to have. So yeah, so come back often and hit like, hit subscribe, and hit that bell button, so that way the next time I upload a video, you'll be notified. And leave me a comment. I will make sure that I answer all the comments below. So now you know a little bit about me, and you know how and when I fell in love with Scotland. So tell me how you fell in love with Scotland and what it is that you love about it. So I will be back very soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.